Alright, today I am going to show you how to bore your engine cases with the router. I've done this once before and it turned out pretty well, and I'm going to try and do it again and show you how I went about it. You should probably say it's really not the way to do this. It should go to you should send your cases off to a machinist. And basically cutting this hole out bigger to be able to use with a big cylinder for like a big bore motor. 54 millimeter cylinder will not fit in the cases unless you bore them out. Usually you send it off to a machinist, tell them what you need, and that's all very exact and all that. This is this is my way of doing it, carpenter style, using a router. Anyways, this is a set of TRX90 cases. I don't know if you can tell how much bigger the hole is, but it's a couple millimeters bigger. The reason for that, 54 millimeter cylinder will not fit in that hole. The spigot is too big. This is the original 70cc, 72cc, goes in there with room to spare. So, first of all, I had to make a jig. That's probably the hardest thing to get right, most important thing to get right. The way I did it, took me 3 tries to get it right. I think 3 tries. Trying to get these holes just right to fit the engine. These holes aren't, they're not all the same dimension. It's not just a square pattern. A couple of them, or one of them, is off. Anyways, show you the way I did it. I started with a 2 1/4 inch hole saw. The material I'm using here is mica. I would say you want something that's pretty dense, pretty hard. Maybe MDF would be good. Particle board maybe. A piece of hardwood, as long as it's nice and flat. Started out, tried to drill this just with a cordless drill by hand. You can't drill this straight by hand. You need a drill press. Started out by drilling the hole with the hole saw. I got my cylinder marked on there, the way it's going to sit. I reamed these holes with the right size. I had to figure out the sizes: 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8 millimeter. I cleaned them out just to get rid of the rust and dirt and such out of there, so that wouldn't be a problem. Now this sits on here like I have it scribed around. You got to get this spigot centered in order to be able to get your holes marked correctly. The way I did that, so I took a piece of polyurethane tubing, cut pieces out of it. They got to be 3/4 or less, because that's what my jig is. 3/4 of an inch. 4 of them. Probably could have had this done beforehand. Anyways, I use these to get this centered all the way around. It's a little tricky to get it started. Put one in, one on the opposite side. Same thing here. Got all 4 in. Now I just look at it, make sure the hole is centered on the spigot of the cylinder. Then carefully flip this over like so. Then I used my drill bits, 7.5, 8 millimeter. Try and do this fairly quick. You got to hold this cylinder so it does not move while you're making these holes. Very important. All I'm doing is going down deep enough to mark it. There's the 3/7.5. I'm kind of rushing through this. You need to take your time and make sure that you get this part right in order to get this jig right. It's bad enough you're not having this done by a machinist. So do your best. Try and make it perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but at least you try. If you don't try, it's not even going to be close. So there's my 4 the studs that go in here. Now I put this back in the drill press, drill those 4 holes so as that the drill press runs them in straight. If you don't get them right, they're not going to work very well. That was the way I finally got my jig working. This is my jig. What I did was chose 2 holes, went and bought screws that were, these are 40 millimeters, and I had to cut, you have to cut them a little shorter for, well, you would see, but these holes aren't quite as deep as these that have the recess in them. So I started with 40 millimeter screws. I had to machine this, I didn't machine it down, I basically just ground it, chucked this up in my drill, and run it against a grinder to take this taper down small enough. These holes end up very close to the bore that you want. And this one you can see I actually had to take a file to it, grind a flat spot. Once I got it in there, it was sticking into my hole here, which is what my router is going to ride on. So I run it down, got it where I wanted. It's got to be flush with the top so your router doesn't hang up on your router. And then I just filed that to match the hole. On the first one I did, these 2 holes ended up, you can see the marks on my cylinder follow this is where the cam chain tunnel is here. First time I did this, I used these 2 holes. The reason I used those is because those were the 2 that centered my jig best on the hole that's in the cases. On this set of cases, it works better with these 2 holes. You can kind of see how you can see the same amount of aluminum in my jig there with on these 2 holes. If I use the other 2, then it causes it to be a little off, maybe like that, whatever. So anyways, get all 4 holes, then pick 2 that center it up best on your engine cases. I had to cut the 1 screws down, probably took a 1/4 inch off of them or something like that. Well, I should have showed you. Getting a little ahead here. First time I did this, I had a little nicer setup with the vise and all that, clamped this all right down. What I have here is my homemade clamp. Right now these cases, I got a couple screws in here. It's just enough to hold them together properly, lined up. I decided to leave the little dowels out. those will probably be good. But anyways, got a couple screws in here to hold these cases together tight. My setup here is just basically a 2x4 to 2x6, or a couple 2x6 would work. I just got them screwed down to this board. I got the board screwed into my sawhorses. It needs to be nice and solid, so this is all under control. All you need to be concentrating on is controlling the router. You don't want this thing bopping around or having your friend hold your motor cases for you. Ain't gonna work too well. Lots of opportunities for problems. So basically, this is a little tall for work. Ideally, you'd like it to be probably a little higher than your hip bone, but I think it'll work. Solid. Okay. So now, where I'm at here, I am going to fasten my jig down. Again, looking in here, making sure everything looks centered. If you have an opportunity to make it better or worse, now's the time. You don't want these screws sticking up high. They got to be countersunk nicely. And I'm snugging them up pretty good, so I don't want nothing moving. Okay, good there. This is pretty much ready to rock. I'll show you my routers here. First time I did this, I used this bit right here. Problem with that bit, and it worked, but it was a little short, the shank on it. You can see the difference. The cutters are about an inch. Those are the same, but the shank on this one is a little short. In order to be able to do this with a 3/4 inch thick jig, I wasn't able to get much of my shank in the router and still have enough bit sticking out. So I got to do it. This is going to be better. Don't need this one. Now what I want here, the spigot, this one is only about 3/4 of an inch. This is a different one. This is about 1 inch, sticking, 1 inch deep into the cases. How deep I have to route in order for that to get all the way down in there. Plus I have a 3/4 inch jig. So what I gotta have is a little more than 1 inch of my bit sticking out past the jig. So that's kind of how I'm going to set this to about 1 1/16 inches, sticking out past my jig or less. That's giving me enough shank inside of the router to where it should be safe. Tighten that down good. Okay, so now my first pass, I don't want to just try and cut this an inch. I'm not going to just cut everything out. You can see this has got a bearing on here. The bearing rides on the jig, like so. Any less than 3/4, this isn't going to work very well. If you try and use just a 1/2 inch thick your jig, you're going to have a hard time. Your first cut is going to be at least a 1/2 inch thick. otherwise your bearing comes out of your jig. That's not going to work. Anyways, my first pass I only want to cut about a 1/4 inch deep. I'm going to do it in multiple passes, so got to have a little bit of bearing showing so it's able to ride on the jig. My first cut is going to be about a 1/2 inch. You can see how I got maybe half of this bearing showing, or a little bit more. Don't want that moving. Okay, so my first pass, it looks like I'm going to be cutting about a 1/2 inch deep. I'll make the first pass, and then I'm going to adjust my router, go a little deeper. Second pass, I'll get another 1/4 inch, adjust my router again. Third pass, I'll set this to the depth that I want, 1 1/16 past the top of my jig. Just see how that goes once I get it going here. This is going to make a big old mess. Just throwing aluminum shavings all over the place. Got a piece of cardboard set up here to kind of keep it out of my garage door a little bit. It's also going to be very loud. Router's loud. It's even louder when you start cutting aluminum with a router. I got notes here. Let me see if talk about safety. This isn't for everyone probably. I have a lot of experience with a router. I'm a carpenter by trade. If you're not used to running a router, you probably shouldn't try this. You also shouldn't try it on your matching engine cases, in case you're going to screw this up and you're going to throw them out in the cases that match your bike. Or just because you don't want to alter your engine cases like that, probably on a rare, if they're rare or valuable or whatever. This router has a ton of power. This is basically just a motor. It's all motor, and it's got some power. This thing will cut you quicker, very fast. This tool scares me, so be very careful. I think if I took this and this thing would cut right into through my skull. Very powerful tool. Let me see what else I'm missing here. If you have strings hanging down off your hoodie that are going to get wrapped up in this thing will grab that string, wrap it up, and it'll climb up the string towards your face. If you're wearing gloves, it'll snag your glove, pull your hand in. No long hair, long strings, loose clothes. Be very careful. You probably want earplugs, which I have. It's going to be loud. Let's see. Oh, these, I forgot to tell you, these through holes need to be 6 millimeter. No bigger than that, so there's no slap stuff moving around. I suppose if I don't think you want to make them any more than 6 millimeters, so your bolts are 6 millimeter. They'll be nice and tight going through that jig. My cases are clean and degreased and all that, so is that I don't have aluminum. It's not catching all this aluminum. Most of the cleaning is done. They'll need to be cleaned again very well to get all this aluminum out of it once I'm done boring them. What else? Also your bit, important when you're routing. When you look at the way this is going to go in here, that's the cutting edge, and it's going to be spinning very, very fast. You want to run this around in the direction to where you're pushing that cutting edge towards the material you're trying to cut. If you try and go around the opposite way, counterclockwise and an inside hole, it's going to jerk this router out of your hand. It's going to try and climb the material basically. You got to go clockwise on the interior inside of this hole. You need to be cutting clockwise. My first pass is going to be I'm going to be cutting a 1/2 inch of material out, and I'm going to be cutting all the way around. So I'm going to go real slow. I'm just going to go lightly around again, lightly around a third time, in order to get it all the way to where my bearing is riding on the hole. Then I'm going to drop the bit. Once I make that first pass, the rest will be much easier because it's only part of the time it'll be cutting. There's voids in here. Should have showed you that on the cases there, but you'll figure that out as you go. But make sure you're controlling the router the entire time. Don't let this thing jump out of your hands. This right here should be set solid, good. The router you have to control. Very important. Be careful, please, if you try this. If you're not familiar with a router, you might want to find somebody who is. Okay. I think we're ready to maybe do some cutting. Make sure your router's not on when you plug it in, otherwise it'll jerk itself, it'll jump right off the table. If you're not sure, then hang on to the router. Okay, earplugs. So I'm going to set my router in here right in the center of my jig. It's not going to be cutting anything until I move it to the over towards my jig, and then I'm going to be going around all the way around this a few times in order to get everything cut all the way full diameter of this hole. So just hang in there with me for a second. Okay, here we go. I think I'm all set. This is solid. This is good. Screwed down. Nice and flush. My bit's set. Ready to rock. That was the worst of it. One of these screws is making me nervous. Spinning around here. Okay. See if you can see down in there. You can see that I've cut about a 1/2 inch deep. I need to go deeper yet, but see now my aluminum is matching my hole on my jig here. Looking good so far. Now I want to do my tip. Okay, I'm looking at this. I know my material is 3/4 thick. So from 3/4, I cut about 1 1/8 from the face of from the table of my router here. So I just made a cut about 3/8 of an inch deep. I want this to go out to 3/4 thickness. for my jig plus an inch and a 1/16. So that takes me out to 1 13/16 total. So right now I'm going to adjust my router. Right now it's set at 1 1/8. I'm going to give it another 1/4 inch or so. Take it to about 1 3/8. That's about half of what I need. I'm going to go extra 1/16. 1 7/16 on the second pass, using 3/4 inch material for my jig. Lock that down, double check, close enough. 1 7/16 earplugs. I'm going to get a little more. Okay, it'll take us a little deeper. Adjusting my router again. This time I'm going out to my full depth that I'm after. One 13/16. Let's look at that. That's 3/4 material. My bearing is still on the material. My cutter is out deep enough to get me. I want to be 1 1/16 deep. So we're looking good right there. Got her locked down tight. Should be the last pass. You can see in there how I'm only cutting in a couple of areas. The first pass I had to cut all the way around. These it'll be areas where I'm not doing really any cutting at all. So the second and third pass are easier than the first for sure. I'm able to basically just get it in the hole, move right over to my bearing riding against this, and then nice and slow working around because I'm only cutting a 1/4 inch deep now, and I'm only cutting part of the time. Control the router, again, most important. Earplugs. Almost done. Here we go. Running out of time?
It's blinking.
Alright, let's hang in there and see what happens. I think my battery's dying, or am I running out of memory on my phone or something, but I just wanted to double check my dimension here, make sure nothing's moved on me, because this is acting funny. Feel good? Alright, I'm hurrying up. Let's see if maybe we can just be done without having to have another video here. Real quick. Get my screws out. There we go. Take a look at the hole. Here's my 54mm cylinder. Fits that hole.